after last chapter where we had a glimpse of one of the Spriggan 12 returning, probably the one that came out the best out of all of them being Brandish, we get a very a little dive into what happened with the rest of Spriggan 12, rest of Alvarez, and Fairy Tail's counterattack from seemingly as well from Team A's side, mainly being Natsu, Greya, Lucy, Wendy. So there's a few things to discuss with this chapter especially, where I think the most one that everyone's going to be talking about is especially the stuff that is involving the Spriggans, and there is some controversial stuff with this as well, and also as well that this, generally, some of the stuff that we found out about them should have honestly been in the manga or just been like, wait, how has some of these been allowed to come back? So there's going to be some interesting things, especially with one thing that they mentioned as well about a character from the Spriggan 12. So when we go and have this little conversation with Lucy and Brandish, and it was like they're just talking to each other, and it's like, oh, like what's going on right now? Everything they're kind of talking about each other and all that. And it's just like, oh, I'm here because of gold. And it's like, well, I have something for here as well. And she mentions, by the way, it's like, oh, by the way, the Spriggan 12 disassembled, and it's all your fault. Like they immediately blame it. It's like, well, not my bother anyway. It's like, it's not easy to unite the people of Alvarez after, you know, we lost this emperor, and it would have been a pain, so I just left. Like, I just left on a quest. That's all I did. They discussed that Angeal is now the new emperor. It was said before as well that he was a prince. Like, we mentioned that before, like, with his, like, old grandpa, like, which I believe is Yajiel, his old man, like, the weird droopy guy with the neck and everything. They mentioned before that he was the one, and apparently that, like, he's kind of good. Like, he has a crazy attitude, but, like, ever since he kind of got his ass handed to him, like, he's actually calmed down a bit, and he's been a little bit more respectful, like, apparently. So that's something where it's like, okay, not really one of the people I was imagining to run, but yeah, they did set up. I thought he would have just cared more about his own country, but, you know, I guess again, the sloppy seconds. That piece of shit Jacob, though, is there actually helping him. You know, I think to classify, he is the worst Spriggan out of all of them. I think Jacob was probably the worst one that we even had for everything from his design to his stupid little thing where he's like, oh, I can't look at women, like, you know, like that. All this stupid shit that he had, like, on him, and, like, the fact that he was one of the few that survived is just outrageous. Not to mention with the controversial stuff with one of them, which was another fan favorite, which was Demaria. Demaria now apparently hates battles. She's now living on a farm peacefully. Yeah, that's the one that was the war goddess is now apparently just throwing that all away without. The problem is, like, I think with the line, I think a lot of people are freaking out about this is because there's no real explanation to it. Like, we thought, like, after last time that, you know, kind of Brandish left with Demaria, and you thought that, you know, maybe they would have had a little bit of talk. It feels like they should have been a little bit more dedicated to it, especially that one where it's like, we just gave up this character and she lost her will to fight, but it's like, it just kind of writes it off and it's just saying this is what a lot of them are. Invel and Nineheart, which apparently were trying to plot another war, you know, like the most faithful of all these people was probably Invel out of all of them, and one little note that Brandish says, Lakade is apparently nowhere to be found. And she even says as well, Irene, Bloodman, Wall, and God Serena are dead. Now, last time it was we were talked about, it said that, like, Lakade was actually possibly, like, they were confirming that he was dead. I mean, he got blown up by Zera, like, so whether or not someone took his body, that's a different thing. We don't know what is going up with him right now, so that could maybe perhaps be a plot point for the future, whether or not they want to continue this thing, but we definitely know the confirmations that obviously, yeah, no, Bloodman and Wall, no way they were ever coming back, and obviously with Irene as well, they were just taught, and they also mentioned as well, you know, that obviously her Grams died as well from there, so, like, you know, the most strongest of all the Spriggans on there, so immediately it's like, that's, like, with Irene, Bloodman, Wall, God Serena, and also as well, like, what we've had, like, with all the people dealt in there with, like, you know, Zerasum Kid being in there, like, you know, 5 of the 12 died. Like, that is like, that's still a heavy amount. Now, mind you, God Serena, like, died probably in the worst way. He got literally one-shotted by Acnologia, out of all people, like, apparently one of the most strongest mages in all of Fiora, and it's like, the one that had the most kind of setup being like a multiple Dragon Slayer user, like he was one of the more stronger people, but you know, that just got thrown out of like, you know, the window, which is still is the one that bugs me out of all of them. But yeah, no, they confirmed their deaths, and she's like, immediately she's like, Lucy's kind of like acknowledging that, yeah, no, you killed people, and you also did as well, and Brandish is there like, I'm not blaming you, like, you guys lost people too and all that, and it's just like, and Lucy's just kind of like, hey, we can be friends, right? And it's like, oh, please, we need a hand, lend us a hand, Brandish, and all that, you know, we got nuts and the others got captured, and she's like, nope, not even gonna bother with that and all that. Then she talked about what her whole little goal is as well, which, you know, we get to see, you know, which kind of turns back to Brandish's whole history and everything, is she came here with her own goal, which was like, you know, when I saw you, you must have had the same reason, but it doesn't really seem to be the case. And apparently, Aquarius's key is in Giltina, and she came here to search for it and going to grab that, and it's just like, well, looks like I kind of ended up helping the enemy and all that. I guess I kind of messed up a little bit. And she's like, oh, but I just won't lend you this and all that. It's like, I'm not going to hand you it, but I'm going to get a head start and all that. I'm going to take Aquarius. And it's like, while you're stuck here. And she just like kind of returns Gray back to normal and saying, well, there you go. Enjoy that. And it was like, there's a generally nice warm moment where she was like, oh, it was actually nice to see you again, and it's like, you know, Lucy even says like, hey, you have a cute smile like on there, you're not a failure, like I hope to see you again. It's like, let's compete to see who has it first. And you know, generally like a nice touching moment for Brand. Again, like Brandish is not like at all, again, like with a lot of the characters from the Spriggans, like this is, again, with the issues of the Spriggans, they're not deep characters, they didn't really have a lot of like writing going into me, which is like, here are 12 powerful people, go, and Brandish was the only real one that had the most dedicated time out of all of them, next to obviously like Xerath's kid, like Kade kind of had some stuff on there, and like the rest of the others just honestly didn't tell you, like, what can you tell us about, like, Ajil other than he's a crazy guy that's a prince, like, a crazy sand dude? Like, what can you tell me about Wall? What can you tell me about God Serena, apart from that he was built up from all the chapters? Like, the only ones, like Brandish, like, on there, Jake, like, you know, out of all of them, and Irene, I think, were, again, like, Irene's battle has always been the most questionable part, but not her story. Like, I think, honestly, I would even go to say that I think Irene probably has the best backstory out of all of them, because hers is, like, she was the mother of all dragons, and, like, how she was to, like, magic and everything. It was really, like, I enjoyed that. It's just, like, people with the Urza fights and everything, which, you know, I agree with, where it's, like, I still don't know how I really feel about that fight, and I think once we get to that point in the anime, which I've been kind of building up the episodes to kind of watch again, it's, like, I'm curious to see how they're going to be handling Irene, if there's going to be any changes so far. I know there hasn't been really any numerous changes so far. That hasn't really gone down. So I'm curious in all that, because I know obviously we've had the casting and everything through at least a good chunk of the Spriggans as well. I've heard like what Brandish sounds like in Japanese, obviously because we heard it before in the, you know, the Dragonfly movie. I believe it's the same voice actress, but like that's what we know. And that was the best, like, I think that was the best part of the chapter, was, like, kind of the first stuff. We only get a tiny bit with Fairy Tail Team, like, with Team B, being the Jalal Luxus stuff, where it's like, I'm just going to be staying around in Fiore and all that, and it's like, and immediately he's like, look, I'm going to stay in Magnolia, and I can't let this girl out of my sight. And it's just like, and Luxus comes to agreement, where it's like, yeah, that's fine by me, and it's like, he kind of, weirdly enough, has a little bit of respect for Jalal a little bit, where he's like, if we battled, we know that this is going to go down bad. Like, this is going to be not good to either of us. Because at the end of the day, like, well, what we saw with, like, Siegfried, and then same thing with, like, Jalal as well, is, like, we know at least with him, where it's, like, he is S-class. Like, I will always say Jalal is, like, equally on terms with him, and it's, like, he is S-class, like, a mage. Like, if you want to put him on the pars of, like, say, like, Urza, like, he was a strong... I mean, then again, like, Urza did hesitate slightly with Jalal at some points, but Jalal was going toe-to-toe with her, like, easy. Like, he was easily going toe-to-toe with her, and it was like, I even one-upping her at some points on there. So, generally, like, I think, like, with what they're doing is, like, they're kind of acknowledging is that, yeah, these two are strong as fuck, and you do not want to have these two fighting each other and all that, but if they, like, ever teamed up, that'd be quite, like, instructable. And even Jalal's having a slight bit of doubt with this, where he's like, is she really the white mage? And it's like the fairy tale and all that, and it's like become complicated. And then he's like, God damn it, Urza, like, what the hell have you done letting her in and everything? It's like, you know, what have you guys been up to? Then we cut to Urza, who is still being treated like dog shit and being a pet, and it's just like, eating scraps, crying, like all bloodied up and scratched, and it's just like, yeah, let's have a little more of this dominatrix stuff, I guess. Like, she's there, like, eating, like, stuff and just blogging it out and saying, like, oh, I'm gonna wash you and all that, so, like, don't worry about it, and, like, throwing buckets of, all, or, like, water at her and piss and filth, and it's just like, I still have to show you, and then she's like, oh, show me your butt, and it's just like, yeah, just overall treating her like shit, and then it's when, just out of nowhere, we see with Urza, who just wakes up and then rips the collar off, and it's like, oh, Urza is back to normal now, and it's like, oh, you played with me, huh, bitch, and all that, and then immediately she's like, instead of doing, you know, the smart thing of just going, I'm going to go and rip this bitch's neck out, or just slice her neck right there, she's like, it's not proper, I'm not a proper knight to, like, attack someone. I'm like, no, she defied, like, it is nowhere to the, I'm surprised that, if anything, Urza didn't have PTSD, like, this would have been an interesting point where what they did with Kyoka, like, where they actually bring stuff back, but no, I feel like that wasn't kind of really thought about, really, and it was just like, no explanation about, we just have to assume that there's a time limit, or that somehow, like, Kiria, like, let her guard down somehow and, like, deactivated the magic. Like, again, this is the problem where it's like, I wish we just had an explanation, or it's like, be like, hey, let's talk about the magic. Maybe we might get one next chapter, who knows, but it's like, might be a little bit of side little dialogue, but I kind of wish that we knew a little bit more about it, because, I mean, we don't know if it can be reapplied after, like, a day or something, and with that, we know that Urza goes to rescue, like, Natsu and Wendy, and they're like, okay, and it's like, look, we need to, I'm going to take care of the magic sealing stone right now, and it's just like, we need to take care of this, and it's like, oh, but there's still a little bit problem right now, is that they're still in the ship, and they're, like, now about throwing up. Then something interesting happens where goddamn Brandish leaves one little present for him, as she immediately puts their ship onto a giant hill and all that. It's just like, I already just made a bigger underwater rock bigger, and it's like, well, it's just like, Johnny, like, see you next time, like, on there, just smiling on her little ship, and it's like, alright, and that's the ending of the chapter. It's like, counterattack time. Urza, Wendy, and Natsu on the ship, now on a playing field, beaten up, mind you, and yeah, we're gonna begin our round 2 with Urza and Kiria probably. We're gonna have Natsu on there. Interesting that Wendy's gonna fight, like, if they're gonna, like, immediately go into, like, Natsu probably want to go against Madmol, or Madmol, whatever you want to say his name is, but it's like, I'm curious about the next chapter, but again, like, I like some of the stuff with Brandish and Lucy in this chapter, but I think they could have utilized the stuff with Urza being actually scarred from, like, what happened to her during, like, you know, everything that happened with, like, or with Kyoka, where she got actually tortured and kind of made look like shit, and, like, they messed with her and all their senses and everything, and you actually saw that she still felt that, and that was still affecting her, but it kind of seems like they just kind of forgot about that. Not to mention as well, some of the stuff with the Spriggan 12, I'm glad that we get a aftermath of, like, what happened to the ones that survived, and a little bit with the country as well, like, what happened to Alvarez, but nothing more than, like, Demaria to me is baffling. I feel like they could have done something more with her, but it just generally feels like there's around about, like, 7 characters left. What do they all do? Brandish makes sense, because she wants to go for the Aquarius key as well. That, I understand that, and to be fair, she was the one I was expecting to see again, or at least mentioned at all, if we were ever going to see her, or, like, even in the anime, they had something where she's like, she just goes somewhere else. I wouldn't be surprised if in the anime, in the final shot, they show a picture of, like, Brandish, like, leaning on a boat. I wouldn't be, like, that'd be a little thing that they probably might do, because they probably might adapt this, because there have been talks recently with Mashima where he's been like, there's going to be other projects in the work for Fairy Tail, so, like, and not to mention as well with Eden Zero, so I think they're already talking about it where it's like, it's clearly successful in the West. Again, we don't really know with Eden Zero, we don't know about its sales manga-wise in the Japanese so far, where the first 2 volumes are fine. It isn't gangbusters, it wasn't probably, I imagine it wasn't exploding like maybe what they expected. I know the Japanese numbers could be, you know, quite questionable sometimes with some of their stuff on there, but with the response that it's been getting, and I feel like it's gonna take a little bit more for Eden Zero. Like, I still think the manga as well, that still needs to build up a little bit more, because I think we're getting nearly to like half a year, and it's like, it's fine, but it's like it still has not done that wow factor for me yet. Where it's like this is the reason you read it and all that. Like, but it's just more like if you love fairy tale or you want more of that of what this crate is, and then there you go. So again, whereas like I feel like this has been majority, I would say, comparing this like the 13 chapters that we've had of this at the same time as Eden Zero. I would say I prefer this better, but even still, I think this has issues as well. So again, I'm excited for the counterattack and seeing what they're going to be doing, and probably will, like, knowing us and all that, we might even conclude the stuff with these Dragon Slayers. It's still crazy to think that it's going to be that rushed to dealing with them, but I think you should kind of expect that since how they're setting it up. It's like, yeah, no, we're going for the second round already. I thought we'd be like, at least going somewhere else and all that before we kind of like disappear, but no, whether or not that Grey and Lucy are going to reach back in time and all that, like, we'll have to wait and see, because Grey at the moment is unconscious, but he probably wants his round 2 as well, so they might try and, like, fill him into that one. But overall, a fine chapter. I definitely did enjoy this one, but I feel like there's a few little nicks here and there where it's like, little questionable things with the writing here and there. It's like, I'm not too sure, but overall, I did enjoy the chapter, and I was happy to see Brandish, because I do like Brandish as a character. Like, as much as all that, she's not the deepest out of all of them, all that. Like, I think like she had some good moments, at least to her and all that, at least from the war and all that. So that's all for me. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you guys though next time though. So see ya.